I went to a restaurant in town the other day, and I got chicken fried steak. It's a 24-hour restaurant. It was a normal meal, diner fare. We're talking country fried steak, a lump of mashed potatoes with some gravy, a salad that doesn't have any carrots in it, just a basic salad with some salad dressing, lettuce, a small pile of green beans, which are exactly identical to what I would get out of a can. Probably about half a can worth, all things considered. A couple scoops of ice cream, which wound up costing, I think, $7. And when all was said and done, throw in a cup of coffee, and I paid $37 after a tip to eat what was ultimately a simple meal. There was nothing about it that was special in any way. It was something that I could have pretty much made at home without a lot of effort, and I don't know what it would have cost. I know it wouldn't have cost $40 though. So the reality is the cost of living has gone up. We've seen the price of things go up at the grocery store, but we've seen the price of things go up even more when it comes to things like eating out. And increasingly, I find myself realizing that the quality just is not in any way worthy of the price that I'm paying. So if there's not any amazing experience there, like this restaurant is a great case in point. I walk in and there's one person on duty there running around doing a few different tasks. They don't have time to get everybody seated promptly, so you have a bunch of people jammed in there waiting for someone to come and find them and get them seated. And then it seems like the person who's delivering the service just doesn't have any desire to engage, really. They're just pretty much very neutral, just doing their job as much as they can to try to keep things moving. So it's not a fun, engaging experience. It's not a particularly good meal. It's an okay meal, and it costs $40, and that's just me. So what if I go with a friend or a date or something? Well, you're talking $80 for a basic meal that's not even high quality, and that's a kind of hard sell. Then think about actually going to a higher end restaurant. What's that like? You pay even more. Like, if you're eating out with somebody, then you're gonna potentially spend over $100 for a meal, probably closer to $200. And then there's the issue of whether people are actually even worth spending time with, because I think we've sort of had this issue of people becoming less fun to be around, I guess. Maybe some of that is just me and my perspective on life has changed, but I feel like most people are just dry and boring, and I don't really want to be around them. Like, they're going to slander people. They're going to, be chasing something that I don't think is interesting. Like, for example, maybe I like playing computer games, and somebody else is going to want to sit there and talk about sports all day, and I could care less about sports. Or somebody else might want to talk about politics all day long, and I'm interested in politics, but I don't want to define my life by political stuff, and then people start to want you to validate whatever position they have. And so there's just a lot of conversations you can wind up having that are just, they're not very productive. They're not very fun. Maybe you go out with coworkers and then they want to talk about their boss or something of that nature, and then it turns into an uncomfortable conversation where people are talking about things that violate confidentiality, or they're just not very professional or something of that nature. So there's so many reasons why it's easy to start saying, well, I don't know that I really need to hang out with people. Then you throw in this whole notion of everything costing way more than it used to. And it creates this perfect kind of a dynamic where it just becomes a lot more practical to say, I guess I won't go out. I won't hang out with people. I'm not going to go to the expensive restaurant. I'm just going to eat food at home that satisfies me. I'm just going to go play that computer game that I enjoy. And, is that something that, people are going to, I don't know, judge me for or something? Well, maybe. But the truth of the matter is, I can spend $80 for a meal for two, or I could spend $80 and buy an entire deluxe edition of most AAA games for that. But then I also even think about how things seem like they've gotten cheaper in the gaming space too. Now there are things that I'm excited about. There's games that I'm looking forward to, like Anno 117 is going to come out. I've seen some other games that caught my attention, like Busbound. That looked like a pretty cool bus driving game that is going to be released at some point later this year. I may well give that one a try. I'm not saying that there's nothing cool out there that I enjoy, because I do. There are things that are interesting. But increasingly, whether it's movies or games, I wind up just reverting back to some of those tried and true things that I kind of fell in love with a while ago. They scratch the itch to some degree of what I'm looking for in a game, and I just let it be what it is. And I think that that's kind of maybe a sign of the times. I've read articles about how I think Gen Z is a lot more minimalist than previous generations have been, because they kind of realize the system is not exactly giving them what they want. And so instead of getting on that gear treadmill and chasing endlessly, a lot more people are saying, well, I'm just going to do what is right for me. I'm going to try to be happy. I'm going to try to be at peace. I'm going to try to meet my personal needs, my dietary needs, my social needs in a way that satisfies me. And I'm not going to just continue to consume endlessly all of the noise that is being sold. Because there's more and more situations in life where it's becoming apparent that if you consume all the things that people say you ought to want to consume, you wind up overextended. You wind up spending more than you are comfortable with, or more than you're able to comfortably spend, and you don't actually get anything really to show for it. So that's a good case, I suppose, for minimalism. But I also think there's some commentary in there that our society has sort of gotten cheaper in a way. And maybe it's sort of like the furthest extent of the Roman Empire, Like, there was this time when the Roman Empire was at its peak, and there was a lot of corruption, and there was a lot of affluence, and there was a high quality of life for a lot of people. But increasingly, the overall trend was that the republic was winding down, Maybe Rome would have another couple hundred years ahead of it. But there's that period of time when its glory was behind it, when the best days were behind it. And sometimes I feel like for those of us living in America, that's kind of where we're at. I think the good news is eventually, when all things are said and done, we're going to, we're going to be okay. People will continue to talk about things and have their thoughts about the world and find their way to navigate the complexities of life. And I would imagine that 1,000 years from now, people will still be talking about many of the same things we talk about today. I'm sure the problems will evolve and they'll be different, but people will still be people and life will still go on. Maybe the United States will fall out of favor. Maybe it will completely go away. Probably, more likely, it will not completely go away. It will maybe not be center stage as it rather has been for quite some time. But regardless of what happens, we'll probably look back on this time period and say, that was the peak of that Pax Americana, that era of greatness when people overconsumed and when people felt like life had no limits. When people get proud, they eventually will be humbled. And so, if there is a lesson there, it's probably that we should be living our lives humbly now, because if you learn how to live your life in a humble, simple way when times are good, then you're going to be more able to live your life successfully and find a way to adapt when times are harder. And I do think there's a good chance that times will get harder. Because right now we do live in a time of abundance. Look at the gaming space. We talk about how games aren't what they used to be and things like that. And, what is the reality? The reality is it's not so much that the games aren't any good anymore. It's that we have extremely high expectations of what we want to see, because we kind of live in a time of abundance. There's no shortage of things we can play. There's always a new title coming out. There's always some new thing that's right around the corner. And so we're always sort of hoping for that next big thing that's going to, bring satisfaction into our life. We're looking for something all the time that's going to somehow make our lives feel more exciting than they were before. And we never really find it. And we spend a lot of money and a lot of resources looking for it. But when you don't have very much, and I've talked about this when we've discussed things like gaming burnout, when you were a kid, you didn't have the option to go buy every single game in the Steam library. You didn't have maybe options to play games as much. There was a lot of stuff that was just not really in your capacity to do. Maybe times were simpler and the graphics were simpler, and the games we were able to play were not as advanced as they are today, so we used our imagination more. And I guess it all comes down to we made the most out of what we had instead of always looking for something more. And we found ways to connect with other people when we didn't necessarily have as much variety in choice. I think when times get a little bit harder, then people find a way to connect in more genuine and authentic ways. If you go into the grocery store and there's 100,000 different things you could throw into your shopping cart, well, do you do you feel like you're better off with all of that choice, or do you get decision paralysis? And then instead of being overjoyed with all of the choices, you wind up being just overwhelmed by them. I think that happens a lot. And compare that to people who maybe don't have very much to eat, then just that one meal would be very meaningful because they don't have very much to really choose from. So having a little bit of something good goes a long ways and is an important thing. So sometimes less is more. Sometimes it's better to just cut out the noise and not worry so much about consuming things. And then just think about, what kind of experience do you get out of every single thing you're doing in your life, every single thing you're buying, everything you're eating. Are you getting something meaningful out of it, or did you just kind of go consume it because it seemed like something to do and you felt like it was going to be in some way a positive experience, but the reality was it was a pretty lackluster experience? And if that's how it is, then we're better off just, maybe cook your meals at home and play a game you enjoy and don't pay too much attention to all of the noise and the comings and goings of the world, and have fewer friends and be less connected and be more mindful and, just enjoy your life. Usually I think there's enough to go around for everybody. But there is this myth that everyone can have everything, It's like all of the crypto bros will tell you that if you buy the cryptocurrency, then you will have your own private island somewhere. And, there's unlimited money and unlimited wealth to be had at the foot of the rainbow if you just buy whatever ism someone is trying to sell. But the reality is the only people who really get ahead are the ones who are selling, not the ones who are buying. They say if something is free, then you are the product. And, there's a lot of things in life that are unreasonably expensive. But part of why we buy into them so much is because they always sell themselves as being a really good value. It's like that meal at the restaurant that says it's $20 on the menu, but then miraculously by the time you actually pull out your credit card, it's $40 because you've got to pay for all the extras and the tip and all that other stuff. Or you go to a cell phone place and they tell you they're going to give you a free cell phone, and the next thing you know, you're paying a few $100s a month because it's all about the charades of convincing people that they need to do things and then sort of doing a rug pull and not giving them very much of what they implied at the beginning. Life is filled with fool's gold and false errands and things that just leave us feeling a bit disappointed with the experience. And if that's the case, then we should probably make a point to remove some of those things from our lives so that we can return to a place of peace and harmony. Wherever you find yourself, good luck on your adventure. Till next time, as always, thanks so much for watching.